Welcome back. A young boy from our area has been arrested in connection to the January suicide death of another boy in Texas. The Michigan boy allegedly convinced him to kill himself while they were playing video games.
An incredibly sad situation. It happened just north of Houston, where police say the victim was found with a self-inflicted gunshot wound, still wearing a gaming headset, and also he appeared to have been online at the time of his death.
Joining us to talk about online spaces and the ways that they can impact kids is Dr. Gerald Shiener, a psychiatrist who's also an associate professor at Wayne State University. Thanks for joining us today, Dr. Shiener.
Thank you, Shannon.
So there is a new Pew Research Center that studies this situation. They found that nearly half of all teens are using the internet almost constantly. What kind of impact would you say that this could have on this generation of kids?
Well, I think it changes their perspective. And when you get sucked into being online almost constantly, you lose touch with reality, you get engulfed in what you're doing, you learn how to focus in a very narrow aspect, and things lose their perspective. And that's when you see kids bullying each other, coercing each other, and tragic outcomes like this instance.
Are there particular kinds of games that should be avoided? You know, they say this poor boy in Texas was found with the headset still on. Is it the games where you're verbally interacting with other users on a constant basis, or does it matter?
I don't think that part matters, because I think these kids are isolated, and when they interact over gaming on the internet, they're interacting with people who are anonymous, and it's kind of safe. I think that's part of the attraction. So I don't think that's the issue. And there's a lot of controversy over violent video games, the point of view shooter games where you're shooting other people. I think that sort of numbs these kids to violence. It numbs these kids through the outcome of a death. And I think those are the kinds of games we have to take a close look at. But whatever you do to try to control them, kids find their way around, and they'll bootleg the games, or they'll find the sites where they can do that. So there are only some things that parents can do in a very limited way, and to give the kids the message that they're being watched and that the parents know what they're up to.
Yeah, and we know that the Center for Disease Control Prevention says 1 out of every 6 children in the United States is dealing with some kind of mental health illness. So when you add that to the equation, and some of these kids are being left alone for hours with these sometimes violent games that can be triggering, how dangerous of a situation are we looking at?
Well, that's a disaster waiting to happen. And the important thing that you can do as a parent is identify the kids who need help. And if your kids are withdrawing, if they're isolating themselves, if they're neglecting their hygiene, or if they've dropped all their friends, or if they don't have any friends, then you have to work to make contact with your pediatrician or your primary care doctor and see if you can get that child help. The other thing is that you can encourage kids to use their gaming and their computers in public areas of the house instead of isolating in their own rooms. That's another disaster, and that gives kids the idea that at least you're watching them and you want to know what they're up to. You can't prevent everything that happens, but if you let them know that you're interested, you want to keep an eye on them, you want to monitor them, make them keep the door to their room open, things like that, that'll send a message that you're looking for some kind of oversight and some kind of control, and kids will respond to that. But the kids who are struggling with mental illness, depression, isolation, suicidal thoughts, the more they isolate themselves, the more they get steeped up in those thoughts, and the more dangerous the situation becomes.
Yeah, sounds like a very important conversation to have around the holidays. A lot of kids may be getting new games or consoles. Doctor, as we wrap up here, do you have any tips for parents whose kids are already pretty invested in these games? If they need to reel that back and reel it in a little bit, how can you start that conversation to let the child know exactly what you're doing and why?
We're worried about you. You're spending a lot of time in your room. We want you to be part of the family. You can play your video games in the library while we watch TV in the living room, but at least we want you in a public area of the house. How are you doing? Parents have to communicate with teachers to make sure that things are going well at school. All of those things are going to be important to give a child a message that parents are interested, they want to monitor their children, and they're being watched. These things aren't happening in a vacuum, so that's most important.
All right, a very important conversation to have. Dr. Gerald Shiener, psychiatrist at Wayne State Associate Professor as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.